Ethan walked slowly across the barren plain, the red dust crunching beneath his boots. The sky above was heavy with dark clouds, and streaks of lightning flashed in the distance, giving the world a strange glow. He had been traveling for hours, his supplies running low, his body weary from the endless march across a planet that was not his home. The wreckage of his shuttle lay far behind him, a twisted reminder of how fragile human machines could be in the vastness of space. Yet even in his exhaustion, Ethan's mind stayed sharp. He knew that if he gave in to despair, he would never find a way to survive. As he climbed over a ridge of jagged stone, he froze. Below, near the broken walls of what seemed to be an old, alien structure, sat a figure. At first he thought it was a trick of his tired eyes, a shadow shaped like a person, but when the figure stirred and turned its head toward him, he realized it was real. His heart beat faster. He had never seen another living being on this world since the crash. The figure was small, almost fragile, with skin that shimmered faintly under the fading light. Her eyes glowed softly like silver lanterns, though her face was thin with hunger. She sat curled against the stones, her arms wrapped around her knees, as if trying to keep herself from falling apart. Ethan felt an instinctive pull. This was not a soldier or a threat. This was someone in pain. He approached slowly, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. The girl watched him closely, her glowing eyes never blinking. Ethan could see now that her lips were cracked, her breathing shallow. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. For a moment he hesitated because his own rations were nearly gone. He had one pack left, a small portion of compressed food, enough to give him strength for one more day of travel. If he gave it away, he would have nothing. But as he looked at her again, trembling and too weak to rise, he felt the decision form inside him. What good was surviving another day if he left someone else to die before his eyes? He reached into his pack, pulled out the food, and slowly placed it on the ground between them. The girl tilted her head, confused. Her people had never known such gestures from strangers. For a long moment she did not move, as if unsure whether this was a trick. Then, with surprising speed for someone so frail, she reached forward and seized the food. She tore it open with careful precision and began to eat. She did not speak at first, but her gaze never left Ethan's face. He stood quietly, letting her eat in peace, though his stomach clenched at the thought of the hunger he would feel tomorrow. When the food was gone, the girl leaned back against the stone. Her voice came at last, soft and strange, as though more than one tone spoke at once. "Why?" she asked. The single word echoed slightly, making the air feel heavier. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck, trying to find simple words. "Because you were hungry," he said. "That's reason enough." The girl's eyes narrowed, studying him as if searching for a hidden meaning. "Among my people," she whispered, "to need is weakness, to accept is shame. Yet you give freely." Her voice carried both wonder and suspicion. Ethan shrugged. "Where I come from, sharing keeps us alive. Hunger doesn't make someone weak, it makes them human, or whatever you are." He gave a small, tired smile, trying to ease the tension. For the first time, the girl's expression softened. She tilted her head again, almost like a curious child. "I am Leora," she said, "daughter of she who rules." The words struck Ethan like a stone. He realized then that this was no ordinary wanderer. The fragile girl before him was the daughter of a queen, a member of some royal bloodline. What she was doing alone, starving in the ruins, he could not understand. But one thing became clear. His small act of kindness had bound him to something far larger than himself. The wind howled through the ruins, carrying dust and whispers of the storm that approached. Leora stood shakily, her legs trembling, but her posture still proud. She looked at Ethan with a strange intensity, as though she had already decided something about him. "You have given me life," she said. "Now you must come. My mother will want to see you." Ethan blinked, startled by the sudden demand. He had expected thanks, maybe a few words before they went separate ways. Instead, he found himself staring at the glowing-eyed daughter of an alien queen who now insisted that he meet her mother. He almost laughed at the absurdity, but the seriousness in her eyes silenced him. Somewhere deep inside, he felt the weight of his choice pressing down. Feeding her had seemed like such a small act. But here, in this strange world, small acts carried consequences greater than he could have imagined. As lightning split the horizon, Ethan realized his journey had only just begun. Ethan followed Leora through the ruins with heavy steps, still trying to understand what had just happened. The girl walked slowly, her thin frame swaying, but there was a determination in her stride. She had eaten only moments ago, yet it was as if that little food had sparked life back into her. Her glowing eyes lit the dim paths, casting strange reflections against the broken walls. Ethan had many questions. About her people, about why she had been left starving in such a lonely place. But he did not know where to begin. Leora broke the silence first. "You should not have done that," she said without looking at him. "Given you food?" Ethan asked. His voice was calm, though inside he was still uneasy. "Yes," she replied. "Now the bond exists. My people will see it." Ethan frowned. "A bond? What bond?" She finally turned to him, her silver eyes sharp despite her weak body. "You shared your strength with me. Among my people, such an act cannot be ignored. It means you see me as yours, or you wish me to see you as mine. My mother will not let this pass." Ethan let out a soft laugh, though it was more from nerves than humor. "Back where I'm from, giving someone food just means they were hungry. That's all." But Leora shook her head. "Not here. Here, nothing is given freely. Everything is a test. Everything is a measure of power." She stopped walking and faced him fully, her posture surprisingly regal for someone who had been so close to collapse. "You may not know it, human, but you have already changed the path of my life. That means you must stand before the queen." The weight of her words pressed on Ethan. He rubbed his temples and muttered, "Great. All I wanted was to survive one more day, and now I'm being dragged to meet alien royalty." Despite his sarcasm, Leora's lips curved into the faintest smile. She seemed amused by his honesty, as though she was not used to such plain speech. They continued walking, the wind carrying the smell of rain and dust across the open plains. As the storm rolled closer, Leora guided Ethan to a sheltered place beneath a natural arch of stone. They sat together, the silence stretching between them once more. Ethan's stomach growled, reminding him of what he had given up. Leora heard it, and for a moment her expression softened with guilt. "You will suffer for me," she said quietly. "I do not understand why." Ethan leaned back against the stone. "Because where I come from, we don't let people starve when we can help. That's it. No trick, no hidden reason." He glanced at her glowing eyes, trying to read them. "You keep looking at me like I'm lying, but I'm not." Leora studied him for a long time, her gaze unblinking. Finally, she said, "Perhaps that is why your kind is dangerous." "Dangerous? For giving food?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Yes," she replied. "Kindness can weaken walls. Kindness can break chains. It can make the strong question their strength. My mother says such things are poison. Yet I ate your food, and I am alive because of it." Her words lingered in the air, heavier than the storm outside. Ethan realized then that she was not simply leading him to her mother out of duty. There was something else, something deeper stirring inside her. His small act had shaken her beliefs, and that frightened her as much as it intrigued her. As night fell, the storm passed over them. Flashes of lightning lit the horizon, but the arch kept them dry. Ethan could not sleep. He kept thinking of what tomorrow might bring. Meeting an alien queen was not part of any plan he had imagined when he left Earth. Yet here he was, tangled in the affairs of a people he did not understand. Leora sat with her back straight, watching the storm fade. Her voice was soft when she spoke again. "When we reach the palace, many will hate you. they will see you as a threat. Do not show fear. If you do, they will tear you apart with words before they ever raise a hand. Ethan let out a long breath. Sounds like politicians. Guess some things don't change no matter the species. She tilted her head, confused by the word, but she seemed to grasp his meaning. For the first time, she laughed. A quiet, almost musical sound. It lasted only a moment, but it eased the tension between them, leapt, and her glowing eyes scanned the path with the focus of someone who had traveled it many times. Ethan noticed how she carried herself with dignity, even in silence. There was pride in her steps, pride that seemed to return now that her weakness was fading. They passed through a valley where rivers glowed with streaks of blue light. Strange fish leapt in the waters, leaving trails of sparks that danced before, fading. Ethan stopped for a moment, marveling at the sight. It looks like the river itself is alive, he whispered. Leora glanced back at him. It is alive. Everything here breathes. Even the stone beneath your feet remembers the steps of those who walked before. Ethan tried to smile, though her words unsettled him. On Earth, we'd just call it a river, but I'll take your word for it. As they traveled farther, Ethan's human nature showed itself in small ways. When they reached a steep climb, he offered his hand to Leora. At first she hesitated, her pride warring with her weakness. But when her legs trembled, she accepted his support. His grip was steady, pulling her upward without judgment. She looked at him afterward with a strange expression, as though trying to understand why he gave help without expecting reward. Later, when the heat grew heavy, Ethan removed his jacket and draped it across her shoulders. She had not asked, but he saw how the sun made her skin glisten with strain. She touched the fabric gently, surprised by the gesture. Among my people, she said, to give one's cover is to admit your own weakness. You risk sickness. Ethan shrugged. Among mine, it's called being decent. Her lips pressed together as though she wanted to argue, but no words came. Instead, she walked in silence, her fingers lightly clutching the jacket as if she feared it might vanish. The path soon led them into forests, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The trees rose high and wide, their bark translucent, filled with veins of glowing liquid that pulsed like blood. Every few steps, a branch would release a shower of glowing dust that drifted like falling stars. Ethan could not help but stare, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. Leora noticed his awe. You look at the world as if it is a gift. Isn't it? Ethan replied. Back home, we dream of places like this. To you, it's normal. To me, it's a miracle. She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. Strange human, you see beauty where my people see only resources. Perhaps that is why you frighten me. Ethan chuckled softly. Frighten you? I'm the one who crashed here without a plan. But she did not laugh. Her voice was steady and serious. Kindness, wonder, these things change hearts. My people guard against such things because they make us question the strength we worship. You may not see it, but every step you take unsettles what I have been taught. The weight of her words lingered between them. Ethan realized she was not exaggerating. His very presence, his simple human habits were already creating ripples in her thoughts. By evening, they reached a cliff that overlooked the distant palace. Ethan stopped in his tracks, staring at the sight. The structure rose like a living mountain, its walls carved from dark stone that pulsed faintly, as if alive. Spires reached into the sky, glowing at their tips with energy that lit the horizon. Bridges of light stretched between towers, and great creatures circled the skies above, their wings shining with metallic colors. That's a palace? Ethan asked in disbelief. Looks more like a city made out of one giant creature. Leora stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the glowing citadel. It is the heart of my people. It is alive, as all things must be. And within it, my mother rules. Her voice carried both pride and tension. Ethan let out a low whistle. And she wants to see me. Yes, Leora answered softly. She will not understand you, but she must see you, because I have spoken your name within myself. That cannot be undone. Ethan rubbed his face with his hand, sighing. You keep saying things like that and I have no idea what they mean. But I'm guessing it's important. It is, Leora said simply. They camped near the cliff for the night, the palace glowing in the distance like a beacon. As Ethan stared at it, unease settled in his stomach. He thought of the queen, of the strange traditions Leora had described, of the way kindness was seen as weakness here. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake back in the ruins when he gave away his last food. But then he looked at Leora, who sat close to the fire with his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. Her glowing eyes were fixed on the horizon, but her expression was softer than before. For all the uncertainty ahead, Ethan realized that his choice had already saved a life. Whatever the queen demanded, whatever trials awaited him, he could not regret that. As the stars spread across the alien sky, Ethan drifted into uneasy sleep, knowing that tomorrow his steps would carry him into the very heart of an empire that did not yet know what to make of a human who believed kindness was strength. The path to the palace grew more difficult as Ethan and Leora drew closer. The ground turned from soft soil to hard black stone that pulsed faintly beneath their boots, as though the land itself was alive. Ethan felt a steady vibration in his bones, like the heartbeat of some enormous creature. It made him uneasy, yet Leora walked with calm steps, as if the pulse comforted her. By the time they reached the base of the palace, Ethan understood why she had called it alive. The walls were not simple stone. They rose high and curved with the shape of growth, covered with lines that glowed like veins carrying energy. The entrance was no door, but a vast archway that opened and closed with a slow, breathing motion. Ethan hesitated at the threshold, watching the structure inhale and exhale like a slumbering beast. You walk into the heart of my people, Leora said softly, sensing his unease. Do not falter. The court will watch every step. Ethan nodded, though his throat felt dry. He followed her inside. The interior stretched into vast halls, their ceilings lost in shadows. Walls shimmered faintly, giving off enough light to walk without fire. Strange figures moved through the passages, tall aliens with skin like stone, their eyes glowing in shades of gold and green. They wore robes that rippled like liquid metal, and their voices carried low hums that echoed against the walls. Ethan felt their stares as he passed. Some looked at him with open curiosity, others with contempt. Whispers followed him, though he could not understand the language. Leora walked with her head high, ignoring the murmurs. She led Ethan into a great chamber, a space so large it felt like the inside of a mountain. The floor was polished black stone, smooth as glass, and the walls pulsed with light that shifted like waves. Dozens of aliens filled the chamber, seated on raised platforms carved directly from the living palace. Their glowing eyes watched in silence as the two entered. At the far end stood a throne, unlike anything Ethan had seen. It was not a chair, but a towering structure of living crystal that rose in spirals. Energy crackled softly around it, and upon it sat the queen. Ethan felt his breath catch. She was taller than all the others, her form wrapped in flowing robes that shimmered with every color of the spectrum. Her skin glowed faintly, and her eyes burned with silver light brighter than Leora's. Her presence filled the chamber like a storm, commanding silence without a single word. Leora dropped to one knee before the throne, bowing her head. Ethan remained standing, unsure of what was expected. The queen's gaze turned to him, piercing and cold. For a moment, Ethan felt as though she could see every thought inside his head, stripping him bare. At last, her voice filled the chamber, low and resonant, carrying power in every syllable. Human. The word echoed, though she spoke in a language he should not have known. Yet somehow the meaning came clear to him, carried by her will. Why do you walk beside my daughter? Ethan swallowed hard, then answered as plainly as he could. Because I found her starving in the ruins, I gave her food. She chose to bring me here. A ripple of whispers spread through the court. Some looked shocked, others outraged. The queen's eyes narrowed. You gave her food, she repeated slowly. Why? What did you seek to gain? Nothing, Ethan said. His voice trembled slightly, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. She was hungry. I helped because it was the right thing to do. The chamber grew still. Many in the court sneered, muttering in disbelief. To them, the idea of giving without gain was absurd. But the queen raised her hand, silencing them. You speak of right and wrong, she said. Strange words in my hall. Among my people, survival is earned. The strong consume, and the weak are forgotten. My daughter should have perished in the ruins as tradition demands. Yet you, an outsider, chose otherwise. Why? Ethan's hands curled into fists. He could feel the weight of every eye in the room, but he refused to look away. Because weakness isn't a crime. Because hunger isn't shame. Where I come from, we don't let people die if we can help. That's not weakness, it's humanity. For a long moment, silence filled the hall. Then laughter rang out from some of the nobles. Their voices dripped with scorn. Humanity, one spat. He calls it strength to waste food on the dying. Another sneered. He speaks poison. He would have us pity the weak until we are weak ourselves. Ethan felt heat rise in his chest, but before he could respond, the queen lifted her hand again. The chamber fell silent. Her silver eyes never left Ethan's face. Strange human, she said. You defy our ways with simple words. You claim compassion is strength. She leaned forward, her voice sharpening. Then prove it. You will face the trials of the proving grounds. Survive, and perhaps I will believe your words. Fail, and you will die as all weak things must. Leora's head snapped up. Mother, no! Silence, the queen commanded. Her voice struck, like thunder, and even Leora bowed her head. Ethan's pulse quickened, but he stood firm. He had expected something like this. A queen who ruled with such power would not be swayed by talk alone. She needed proof, and proof meant danger. He looked at Leora, who met his gaze with worry in her glowing eyes. Fine, Ethan said, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. I'll face your trials. The queen leaned back in her throne, her expression unreadable. Then let it be so. The court erupted in whispers once more, excitement and scorn mixing in equal measure. Ethan stood alone in the center of the chamber, the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. He had come this far because of a simple act of kindness, and now that act had led him into a challenge that could cost his life. Yet as he looked at Leora and saw the way she silently willed him to endure, he felt a spark of determination. Whatever the trials were, he would not give up. The proving grounds lay deep within the palace, carved into its living heart. Ethan was led there by guards whose glowing eyes never left him. Their tall figures moved with precision, their steps echoing across the long halls. Leora walked at his side, though her head was bowed. She had tried to speak to her mother again, to stop this trial, but the queen's command had been final. Nothing could change it now. When they reached the gates, Ethan paused to take in the sight. The arena stretched wide, its floor made of smooth black stone. The walls pulsed faintly, and strange lights floated high above, glowing like stars against the dark ceiling. Around the edge of the arena, nobles of the court gathered in rows, their eyes glimmering as they whispered to one another. They had come to watch the human prove or fail his strange claim that kindness could be strength. The queen herself appeared above on a high platform, her presence commanding silence. Her gaze swept over Ethan like a weight. The trials begin, she declared, her voice echoing. Let us see what your humanity is worth. Ethan's chest tightened, but he forced his breathing to steady. He had no weapons, no armor, nothing but his wits and his will. He reminded himself that he had survived the crash, the storms, and the harsh march across this alien world. Whatever this place threw at him, he would endure. The first challenge began with a deep rumble. From hidden doors in the walls, massive, stone beasts emerged. Their bodies glowed faintly as though filled with fire, and their heavy steps shook the ground. Ethan's heart pounded as the creatures turned their glowing eyes on him. The crowd leaned forward, eager to see the human crushed. Ethan knew he could not fight them with strength. He was smaller, weaker, fragile compared to their massive forms. But he remembered the valleys and the cliffs, the rivers and forests. He remembered how he had climbed, dodged, and endured. Survival was not about being the strongest, it was about refusing to give in. When the beast charged, Ethan ran. He darted between them, rolling across the floor and scrambling to his feet as the crowd shouted in surprise. The creatures slammed into each other when they missed him, their heavy bodies colliding with thunderous cracks. Ethan kept moving, using his smaller size as an advantage. He ran toward a wall, then leapt aside at the last moment, letting one of the beasts crash headfirst into it. The nobles murmured in disbelief. This was not the way of their people. Their warriors would have faced the beasts head-on, seeking glory, through direct combat. Yet the human fought with speed, with cleverness, with refusal rather than raw strength. After long minutes of dodging, the beasts grew slower. Their heavy bodies stumbled, their glowing cores dimming. At last, they collapsed, defeated not by force but by exhaustion. The crowd erupted in mixed voices, some shouting in anger, others murmuring in awe. Ethan stood panting, sweat dripping down his face, but he did not fall. He looked up at the Queen's platform, his chest heaving. Strength isn't only about breaking things, he called out. It's about surviving no matter the odds. The Queen's eyes narrowed, but she gave no reply. Instead, she raised her hand and the second challenge began. The floor of the arena shifted, breaking apart into floating platforms that drifted above a dark abyss. Ethan stumbled but managed to keep his balance. From above, ropes of glowing energy dropped, whipping and striking at him like living snakes. The test was not of combat but of endurance. Each strike that hit him burned with pain. Each slip of his foot threatened to send him falling into the endless dark below. The nobles watched with cold eyes as Ethan struggled. His body ached, his skin blistered where the whip struck, yet he kept climbing from one platform to another. Every time he thought he could not go further, he forced his body to move again. He thought of the crash, of the hunger, of Leora's fragile form when he had first found her. If he had given up then, she would be gone. If he gave up now, everything would end here. He pressed on, his will stronger than the pain. Step by step he crossed the shifting platforms until at last he reached the far side. His body trembled with exhaustion, but he was still standing. The chamber grew silent. Even the nobles who had mocked him before now stared in disbelief. The human had endured pain, exhaustion, and fear, yet he had not broken. From her high throne, the Queen rose slowly. Her silver eyes blazed as she looked down at Ethan. "You survive," she said. "You endure. But survival is not victory. One trial remains." The floor shifted again, returning to smooth stone. From a gate on the far side, a final figure emerged. It was no beast, no trap of the palace. It was a warrior of her people, tall and broad, armored in living plates that shimmered with energy. In his hands, he carried a staff that glowed with deadly light. The crowd roared with approval. This was the true test, the duel against a champion. Ethan's heart sank. He had no weapon, no armor, no training for this kind of fight. Yet when he glanced toward the side of the arena, he saw Leora watching him, her hands clenched tight, her eyes filled with something he could only call belief. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He had not come this far to surrender now. Whatever happened next, he would show them that humanity's strength was not in weapons or power, but in refusing to give up. As the champion raised his staff, the trial of the human truly began. The champion stepped forward, his tall form gleaming under the strange lights of the arena. His living armor rippled like liquid metal, flowing with every movement. In his hands, the glowing staff pulsed with raw energy, a weapon that could crush a stone wall with a single strike. The nobles leaned forward eagerly, certain the end of the human had come. Ethan's throat tightened, but he forced himself to breathe. He had no weapon, no armor, and no knowledge of alien combat. All he had were his instincts, his stubborn will, and the lessons he had learned since the crash. Strength was not always about force. Sometimes it was about refusing to give in. The warrior moved first, striking with speed that surprised Ethan. The staff cut through the air, humming with dangerous power. Ethan dove to the side, barely rolling away before the weapon struck the ground, sending sparks of energy rippling across the floor. The crowd cheered, their voices echoing in the chamber. Ethan scrambled to his feet, keeping his eyes on the warrior. He knew one direct hit would finish him. The staff was too powerful, too fast. If he tried to fight the way the warrior fought, he would lose. But if he thought differently, maybe he could last. The champion attacked again, sweeping the staff. In a wide arc, Ethan ducked low, then darted in close, using his smaller size to slip past the warrior's guard. For a moment he thought he could strike, but he had no weapon, only his fists. He swung, landing a punch against the warrior's chest, but the armor absorbed it as if it were nothing. The champion shoved him back, sending him tumbling across the floor. Pain shot through Ethan's side, but he forced himself to rise again. The crowd laughed, mocking his attempt. Yet he saw something in the warrior's stance. Confidence. Arrogance. The belief that the human was no threat at all. That was something Ethan could use. The duel became a game of survival. Ethan dodged and rolled, using the arena's wide floor to his advantage. Each strike of the staff came close, humming inches from his body, but he never stopped moving. He let the champion chase him, let him swing again and again, until sweat beaded on the alien's brow and his strikes grew just a little slower. The crowd grew restless. They had expected the human to be crushed quickly, but he kept standing. His movements were clumsy compared to their trained warrior, yet his persistence unsettled them. The queen watched in silence, her expression unreadable. At last, the champion roared in frustration and lunged forward with a powerful strike. Ethan saw the opening in that reckless move. At the last moment, he sidestepped, letting the staff slam into the ground. The energy blast rippled out, and for a heartbeat the champion's stance faltered. Ethan acted on instinct. He dove forward, grabbing hold of the staff with both hands. The warrior snarled, trying to rip it free, but Ethan clung to it with all his strength. It was not about overpowering, it was about leverage. He shifted his weight suddenly, twisting his body as he had once done when climbing jagged cliffs. The unexpected move pulled the champion off balance. The great warrior stumbled, crashing to one knee. Gasps rose from the crowd. Ethan saw his chance. He drove his knee into the warrior's arm, forcing the staff loose. The weapon clattered across the floor, its glow flickering. The nobles cried out in shock. No one had expected the human to disarm their champion. The warrior rose with a furious roar, charging barehanded now. His fists swung with crushing force, but Ethan ducked and weaved, his body fueled by pure desperation. The champion grabbed him at last, lifting him high into the air, ready to slam him down. Ethan's mind raced. His hands reached out, finding the weak seams in the living armor. With all his might, he jammed his fingers into the crack and pulled. The armor pulsed with pain, and the champion's grip faltered. Ethan twisted free, landing hard on the floor. His body screamed with pain, but he forced himself up again. Across from him, the champion staggered, clutching his cracked armor. The arena had fallen into silence. For the first time, the nobles stared at Ethan not with mockery but with unease. The human, fragile and unarmed, had forced their warrior to falter. The champion roared once more, charging in a final desperate attempt to crush him. Ethan braced himself, every muscle burning. At the last second, he dove aside, letting the alien's momentum carry him forward. The warrior stumbled past, crashing against the wall with a thunderous impact. His armor cracked fully, sparks flickering across its surface. When he turned back, his eyes burned with fury, but his strength was gone. He dropped to one knee, chest heaving. Ethan stood across from him, trembling, his body battered and exhausted, but still on his feet. The queen rose slowly from her throne. The chamber grew still as her voice filled the air. "Enough," she commanded. The champion bowed his head. In defeat, his pride shattered. The nobles whispered among themselves, struggling to understand what they had seen. The queen's gaze turned to Ethan. Her silver eyes shone, not with anger now, but with something sharper. Curiosity. "You have endured the beasts, the trials, and my champion," she said. "You stand when others would fall. Perhaps there is more to humanity than weakness after all. Ethan swallowed hard, his chest still rising and falling with exhaustion. He had no words to give her, only the proof of his survival. Beside the Queen's throne, Leora's eyes glistened with relief. She had believed in him, and now he had shown her people what belief could mean. The Queen lifted her hand, silencing the whispers of the court. "One trial remains," she said, her voice heavy with meaning. "Not of strength, not of endurance, but of choice." Ethan's heart sank again, but his spirit did not break. He had faced everything they had thrown at him, and he would face this too. The final test was about to begin. Ethan stood in the silent arena, his body battered, bruised and trembling from the trials. Every muscle ached, his breath came in ragged gasps, but he was still standing. The eyes of the court were upon him, full of disbelief, curiosity, and some with hidden fear. He had proven his strength not by power, but by endurance, courage, and sheer will. Now, all that remained was the final test, the Queen's judgment. The Queen descended from her throne, her glowing eyes fixed on him. Her presence filled the hall like a storm. Even the nobles who had mocked him before fell silent. She walked with measured steps, her robes shimmering as she moved, and when she stopped in front of him, Ethan felt the weight of her gaze press down on his very soul. "Human," she said, her voice echoing like rolling thunder. "You have survived the trials that would have ended any other. You have endured the beasts, the obstacles, and my champion. Yet endurance alone does not define strength. Tell me now, why should you live among my people? Why should your presence be tolerated?" Ethan's throat felt dry, and the words he had prepared seemed to vanish. He looked around at the court, at the alien faces filled with judgment and expectation, and finally, he turned to the Queen. "Because," he began, his voice steady, though small, "strength is not only in power or weapons. Strength is in hope. Strength is in refusing to give up, even when the world wants you to fail. Strength is in protecting others when you can, not because it makes you strong, but because it is the right thing to do. That is why I live, and that is why I stand here now." For a long moment, the chamber was silent. The nobles muttered among themselves, unsure how to respond. Many were uncomfortable with the idea that compassion could be a form of strength. They had always measured power in combat, dominance, and fear. Yet here stood a fragile human, bruised and beaten, who had outlasted all their measures of might. The Queen studied him carefully. Her silver eyes glowed brighter as she moved slowly, circling him like a predator examining prey, but not with intent to strike. Rather, there was curiosity, almost fascination in her gaze. "You speak of right and wrong, of hope and compassion. These are words my people do not use to measure strength. Yet, your actions have proven something my laws cannot deny." She paused, lifting her hand to silence the whispers. "You have survived not because you were stronger, but because you refused to surrender. You have protected those weaker than yourself, inspired loyalty through your courage, and endured the impossible. Perhaps humanity carries a kind of strength we have not understood." Leora stepped forward, her glowing eyes filled with pride. "Mother," she said softly, "he saved me. He gave me life when none would have. That is strength. That is what matters." The Queen's gaze softened slightly at her daughter's words. She looked back at Ethan, who remained standing, trembling, yet unbowed. "You are a strange being," she said, "a human who challenges all we have known. Perhaps it is time we learn from you rather than destroy you." With a wave of her hand, she signaled the guards to lower their weapons. The tension in the chamber eased, though many nobles still murmured, confused or angry. The Queen returned to her throne, and Ethan felt a mixture of relief and disbelief wash over him. "You will live," she declared finally, her voice carrying over the chamber. "Not as a subject, not as a servant, but as an honored guest of the royal court." You have shown that humanity's strength lies in resilience, courage, and compassion. These are traits we will observe, and perhaps, one day we may understand them fully. Ethan's legs nearly gave way, but he forced himself to stand tall. He looked at Leora, whose smile shone brighter than any light he had seen on this world. She stepped forward and took his hand, gripping it tightly. "You have changed my life," she whispered. "And you've changed mine," he replied softly. The nobles began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, their opinions divided. Some were still wary of this human, but none could deny the proof he had given. Even the champion, who had once seemed invincible, bowed his head slightly in acknowledgement. Outside the arena, the palace walls pulsed gently, the living structure seemingly recognizing the conclusion of the trials. Ethan walked beside Leora through the glowing halls, marveling at the beauty of the living palace. He had survived storms, beasts, impossible trials, and the judgment of a queen, but now a new world had opened before him. As they reached the edge of the courtyard, Leora looked at him with quiet seriousness. "Mother may still test you," she said, "but the first step is done. You have proven what I always believed, that kindness and courage can be stronger than any weapon." Ethan nodded, exhaustion and relief mixing in his chest. "I just did what I thought was right," he said. "I never imagined it would lead here." Leora smiled, a soft glow in her eyes. "It did, and now perhaps your example will teach my people something new. Perhaps it will remind them that strength is more than power. It is heart." Ethan gazed up at the palace towers glowing under the alien stars, feeling the weight of what had happened. He had come from a distant world, alone, lost and hungry. But through simple acts of humanity, giving food, helping, refusing to give up, he had changed the course of an entire civilization. For the first time since his crash, he allowed himself to feel hope. The trials were over, but a new chapter had begun, not just for him, but for the people he had touched. And somewhere deep inside, he knew that no matter how different the worlds, courage, kindness, and resilience were universal. Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion lift just a little. Beside him, Leora's hand remained in his, warm and steady. Together they stepped forward into the palace toward a future that neither human nor alien could have predicted, a future shaped by the simple but profound strength of humanity.